Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3Iron and today we are taking a look at slammers and summoners, giving you a couple of tips and a couple of different build guides to check out with recommendations for starters that you can use either big hits or minions in the upcoming 3.11 Harvest League. I know I shocked some of you with our earlier 4 recommendations, and I heard from some of you saying, "Oh, Iron, I can't believe you didn't make a Necro Summoner suggestion for the League starter." Don't worry, it's because we were making a dedicated video just for slammers and just for minions and summoners. If you are new to the channel, you can like, subscribe, and ding the bell to be notified about future video discussions just like this one. And of course, down below in the video description includes all of the various forum guides that we are going to reference and any other helpful links that might be helpful as you get started in your 3.11 Harvest League. A couple of disclaimers as we get started with the discussion today. First off, a league starter does not mean that this will be, quote, the strongest meta build that will emerge from the upcoming 3.11 Harvest League. We are not projecting strength here. We are aiming to give strong league starter suggestions for summoners and for slammers. A good league starter will do a couple of things. First off, it will push you through the story. It'll get you through the first 10 acts of the Path of Exile campaign. This means that a good league starter will tell you how to go from your very first encounter with Hillock all the way through your second encounter with Kitava. Starters are also meant to push you into maps. This will allow you to take down bosses as well as clear content as you continue to progress, eventually hunting down different conquerors and leading up to your first Cirrus fight as you collect watchstones. A league starter then needs to have options for you as you continue to build a pool of maps and a currency stash tab filled with either crafting options or itemization for you to then be able to take down bigger and badder bosses as you further push your atlas. Starters also need to be free from any required specific uniques. Oftentimes, grinding gear games will change the drop rate of specific items, and those don't necessarily get included in patch notes because we don't have information in general as a player base to what drops when or the frequency of those drops in specific areas. GGG will oftentimes stealth buff or stealth nerf particular types of drops throughout league to league. This means if you league start with something and you're absolutely sure that it's going to be perfectly fine to have this X as a required unique, well, it could turn out that you have a really bad league start because it could be that X became something very, very valuable or that X became something very, very rare. So while we'll talk about some uniques today that are helpful to get your starter going as either a slammer or a summoner, we want to stay away from any required unique. Last disclaimer is that today we are looking at gems and leveling tips as you league start with slammers or summoners. This is going to particularly focus on 2 different types of melee skills and 1 type of minion skill. Tectonic Slam got a big change in the 3.11 patch notes, and it is a big change for consistency. It used to be that Tectonic Slam would have this big supercharged massive slam that would go off with a 35% chance. It wasn't consistent. There were times where it would go off and it would feel great, but you didn't necessarily need the slam because it was going off against, let's say, a pack of normal enemies, and then other times where you might need it against a pack of magic or rare enemies and it simply wouldn't go off. That randomization has been taken out of Tectonic Slam, allowing it to perform at a much more consistent pace and a much more reliable damage output source. For those of you who want to level with Tectonic Slam, you need to know that you can first access it if you are leveling as a Marauder in Act 3 as a quest reward from Sever the Right Hand. If you're playing any other class, you have access to Tectonic Slam after you have completed a Fixture of Fate with Siosa inside the library. This means that you'll need to carry some currency with you because, for whatever reason, Siosa sells gems, but he doesn't have access to a stash in the library. I get it. The library's out in the world of Ray class. Like, you don't want to have people infinitely accessing their stash while they're inside a zone. But it's kind of weird. Anyway, so carry some currency with you when you go and complete that quest. If you completed Sever the Right Hand and are either a Duelist, a Templar, a Scion, or a Marauder, then you can go and purchase from Clarissa Tectonic Slam. So this means maybe you're not actually leveling up as a Marauder. I wouldn't imagine why you wouldn't be playing a Marauder. But anyway, maybe you're not. Maybe you're playing something that's especially hipster, but a buddy in guild or a buddy in global chat is willing to purchase for you Tectonic Slam in Act 3. Tectonic Slam becomes available for every other class, of course, after you have fought and completed Lillyroth's quest in Act 6. A couple of unique items that are going to be helpful. They're not necessarily required for Tectonic Slam builds, but these are consistent across many different Tectonic Slam builds, are going to be Nebulock. That's not going to be available right away because, of course, it's going to be an Elder drop, but that's something to keep a live search going for, along with Comb's Way, which is very, very important. Lion's Roar, which is massive for melee builds because so many players, I assume, are going to be gravitating towards melee builds. Those are going to be relatively expensive, so if you can snipe one early, that's going to be bully for you. Abyssus is going to be very, very strong early on, especially in a softcore league. A lot of players don't mind necessarily taking a bit of extra damage as long as they're getting to output extra damage, and the flat damage from Abyssus is now more important than ever since more and more gems and items have got more damage multipliers built into them and less flat damage built into them. So that flat damage from your helm slot is going to be a big, big damage boost for anybody looking for it. Tomb Fist gloves are also great. Those are, of course, available as you take down different bosses in the Abyssal Depths. Last unique to keep an eye on for, especially for Tectonic Slam, is of course going to be Lore Weave. If you can collect 60 unique rings early on in a league, it is a very, very powerful early to mid-game league chess piece that provides you with flat added physical damage along with some crit and some generic elemental damage as well. One of the reasons why I recommend Lore Weave particularly early on in a league is because it's guaranteed to come with 6 sockets, meaning that you can turn excess jewelers into fusings to try to roll it as a 5 or 6 link. If you're anything like me and you like jumping away from a massive explosion in your background like it's a Michael Bay film, then Earthquake, of course, is going to be your gem of choice as you are looking to slam your way throughout Path of Exile. Earthquake did receive a bit of a change to it with the new update for 3.11, and it's also got a very interesting support that is going to be very, very helpful. It's called Fist of War, and it's now offered to the Marauder, the Duelist, and the Templar for completing the Eternal Nightmare. That's in Act 4, and it can be purchased from Petaris and Vanja by the Scion. Again, that's going to be Act 4. Now, Earthquake itself isn't going to be available unless you're a Marauder and you complete the Sever the Right Hand Act 3 quest. Once again, you can purchase, of course, Earthquake at Ciosa in the library. You'll need to have currency with you if you choose to do that. Or you can purchase it after the completion of the Sever the Right Hand quest from Clarissa in Act 3 if you're a Duelist, a Marauder, a Templar, or a Scion, and then Act 6 from Lily Roth. Now, Earthquake is pretty interesting because we lost a lot of that flat damage, especially for our Aftershock from the base gem from prior to 3.11, but what we do get instead is a more damage multiplier with hits and with ailments. This means if you want to scale up Earthquake to have a massive explosion from the hit, you can do that, or if you really want to scale up either elemental ailments or if you want to scale up, let's say, Bleed Earthquake, you can do that as well. A couple of uniques to keep your eye out for as you are slamming your way throughout Rayclast and making enemies quake beneath your feet are going to be the Praxis Ring. That is very, very helpful to help you manage mana early as you are going throughout the leveling story campaign or even as you hit maps. Adziri's Promise, which is always very, very helpful to give you additional damage on top of what your base damage would already be doing. Carcass Jack as a 6 link or early 5 link can be very, very strong as it gives you extra area damage and some solid defenses on a chess piece. And then as you're leveling, you can use any combination of any of these particular uniques that you happen to find or happen to purchase: Joffrey's Baptism, Limb Split, or Reaper's Pursuit. The key for all of these uniques as we chat about them are to keep an open mind and an open additional browser. Have a live search running and maybe put out a max buyout price. Let's say you get lucky and you've got a couple of fusings laying around or a couple of chaos laying around. If you want to go buy something that's going to help you level early on, maybe you've had some bad luck with the drops that you have had, but you're still committed to leveling with Earthquake or with Tectonic Slam or with some other slam skill, then simply set your buyout price maximum at whatever price it is that you are looking for, and then have that live search running as you are leveling. Do that early and often, not just for the weapon that you're looking to use for the level range that you're in now, but looking ahead. So that way you can purchase something as it's coming and you can easily make that transition as it becomes available to you based on your level requirements or your stat requirements. There are 3 different Slammer build guides that I can recommend for you today. The first, that is above my slightly balding geriatric forehead, is Angry Roleplayer's EQ Juggernaut. This is a massive, massive build for farming the Labyrinth. If you're looking to farm the Labyrinth early on, this is a great build that utilizes Earthquake and uses the classic Earthquake Definitive Ascendancy Juggernaut in order to take advantage of that. If you're looking to slam with Consecrated Path or Tectonic Slam, then I highly recommend Kira 1414's Marauder Slam build. You can play this in multiple different ways. It's got some generic trees and some generic recommendations, and then some specific trees and some specific recommendations for each of the gems as you set them up. Lastly, right next to my elongated beard is, of course, the Duke of Snuff's Tectonic Slam. This is the hardcore super tank version of this build. It is by far the slowest out of these three builds, but it is also out of all three of them by far the safest. This build is something that you can push for level 100 with as a tank in hardcore, and it is incredibly slow when compared with something like, let's say, Cyclone or Conk Path or even EQ. It's a lot slower, but it's a lot safer. So, depending on the broad range of what desires it is that you want to be slamming with, come on and join the slam and choose your build. All right, have all the Marauders and Duelists left the chat? Did they all peace out? Okay, excellent. So it's just us. It's just you and me, my necromantic friends. Excellent. Do you guys remember about a league ago, so many players were saying, "Oh, Iron, the minions are dead. They've killed everything. They killed the Baron Summoner, and now minions are destroyed." And then do you remember 3.10 Delirium League, how a bunch of different players showed off how abusive and OP so many different Necromancer and minion-based builds can be? Ladies and gentlemen, the passive tree got updated, but no, we did not get nerfed. None of the minion builds are dead, and get ready for another league where Necromancers and Summoners will end up being a very safe, very fast, very consistent, very reliable choice for you to league start with or for you to league end with. These things scale up with currency, and you can take out all the content in Path of Exile with Summoners. Now today we're going to focus specifically on raising Spectres. There's a couple of different ways to use raise Spectres. First off, there is the utility Spectre. Blood Chieftain is one of the first utility Spectres that you can get. You can get them in Act 2 in the Southern Forest or at the Crossroads. They're fantastic utility. They've got another brother, the Host Chieftain, and between the two of them, they will summon for you Frenzy charges and power charges. Now, we've got whole video guides on specifically Spectres and how to talk about them and how to use them in general, but these two guys reign supreme as the top two utility Spectres, even after all of the other minions have been added into the game that are now Spectrable after 3.10. There's still a bunch more Spectres out there for you to use as utility Spectres, but these guys are still the tops in terms of augmenting the rest of your minions' damage. If you're looking to run something like SRS, like Animate Weapon, like Zombies, or like Skeletons, any of those particular minion builds, if you're looking to run them and you want to augment their damage with Spectres, then Blood Chieftains and Host Chieftains are the way to go for Frenzy Charge generation and Power Charge generation. Make sure that you link them up with Blood Magic. Otherwise, yes, they actually have mana, believe it or not, and they'll run out of mana, and that will prevent them from actually using their skills and spamming Frenzy and Power Charges on the rest of your undead horde. The second and by far more popular way to use Spectres is to just be a Spectromancer, where Spectres themselves are the primary DPS source for your build. The classic hallmark Slave Driver that's right next to my elongated beard is available starting in Act 5 in the control blocks. That is the first and really primary consistent DPS Spectre really since Act 5 came out. There have been a lot of different Spectres that have risen or fallen throughout the meta, but Slave Drivers have maintained their place as pretty much either the number one spot or the 1A spot throughout the duration of their release cycle into Path of Exile. Now, Slave Drivers are mostly elemental damage, which the good news about that means that you can actually proc elemental equilibrium. You can do damage, let's say cold damage or let's say fire damage, and that will help you as your Slave Drivers deal tons and tons of lightning damage and penetrate through all kinds of elemental resistances. This means if you want to use Armageddon Brand or Wintertide Brand, or if you want to use any other skill that you'd like, maybe even just flat damage onto shield charge, you can do that in order to proc elemental equilibrium to benefit your Slave Drivers. Now, lastly, above my slightly necromantic forehead are the Redemption Sentry Redeemer influenced massive DPS Spectres that have become very popular over the last 2 leagues. These bad boys can take on Cirrus, they can take on the Uber Elder, they can take on Shaper, they can map, and they can clear. These guys are absolutely massive for DPS, and right now, it's basically between these guys and Slave Drivers, depending on which it is that you want to choose for your DPS. The drawback to using Redemption Sentries are that they're only available once you get to maps and once you start taking on Redeemer-influenced maps. So you've got to spawn the Redeemer before you've even got access to these Spectres. Now, there's a couple of ways to do this. One, you can push your own Atlas and get Redeemer Influence yourself. Or 2, you can find somebody else who's already further along in progress than you, simply jump to their map, allow them to spawn those corpses that are on the ground, and then pick them up and away you go. As soon as you've got one corpse from the Redemption Sentry, you can leave a map, go back to your hideout, and then use Desecrate to create more Redemption Sentry corpses. Early on, if I'm going to be playing a Spectromancer as I am leveling, then I use Blood Chieftains in order to augment my SRS or my skeletons or my zombies. Then I swap over and typically use damage from the damaging output that slave drivers provide in Act 5. And then once I reach late game stage, I then transition over into the Redemption Sentries. That's just the way how I choose to progress them. That's not how you have to. There's lots of options out there, and there's no true right way to play a Necromancer. That's one of the things that's great about minion builds. They are the Swiss Army knife in Path of Exile, and you can insert or remove almost anything for the particular job that it is that you are tackling that day in your gameplay session. Some of you may be wondering how it is that so many different players who are Spectromancers or Necromancers get the number of Spectres that they need. Typically on the gem, it says you can have a maximum of 1 to 2 raised Spectres. Now, the way how you go over this limit is you get a second raised Spectre at gem level 13. You get a third raised Spectre at gem level 25. This means in order to achieve both the 3 Spectres from the gem level and then the 2 additional Spectres that are available to us through specific crafts, we will typically need to use some combination of the following. You're going to want +1 minion gems on your wand, +1 to all spell gems, which also apply to your Spectre, on your wand or on your shield. Then you're going to get Elder Boots that just gives you +1 to level of Spectre gems, +1 level of Corrupted gem. You're going to want to level up lots of different raised Spectre gems so that way when they hit 20, you can try to corrupt them and get that +1. Then you're going to get +2 levels from Unnatural Strength, that's on your Necromancer Ascendancy, and +1 to maximum number of Spectres off of your Delve body armor. Lastly, on the passive tree itself, you can grab Death Attunement, which is all the way up on the top left-hand side of the Witch tree, and that gives you +1 to your maximum number of Spectres. So ultimately, you get 4 Spectres from everything off of the passive tree, 1 Spectre from on the passive tree itself, and then you've got a grand total of 5 Spectres that you can mess around with. This means you can have some combination of, let's say, Host Chieftains, as well as Blood Chieftains, and maybe even some DPS Spectres if you really want to. You can go all in on just a DPS Spectre. You can mix it up with multiple different quality of life Spectres. It's completely up to you, but going full on Spectres gives you a grand total of 5 Spectres at the top gem level. If you're looking to play a Spectromancer, in addition to getting those +2 levels from Unnatural Strength, that's the benefit of choosing a Necromancer Ascendancy, on top of that, only the Witch can get the Raised Spectre Gem from completing the Sever the Right Hand quest in Act 3. Now, of course, everyone can buy it from the Fixture of Fate quest in the library, which you, once again, will need currency on your person in order to get, or a couple of different classes can get it from Clarissa, purchasing it in Act 3's town, whether you're a Templar, a Scion, or a Witch. And then, of course, everybody's got access to it by helping Lily Roth in Act 6. So if you're ready to get your summoner starter going, then I've got 3 different summoners to recommend to you. The first one is StupidSmile's Ultimate SRS Minion Instability. That is pictured above my slightly necromantic forehead. SRS is still a massively strong skill, and the fact that we've now got cries, war cries, that are actually going to add to the damage of SRS is simply amazing. We've already got lots of different buttons that we can be pushing as a summoner, and now that we've got war cries that are added to that, it's going to be a tough choice to choose exactly what it is that we want to be using in order to augment our SRS's damage. However, if you want to go with the minion instability route, which is the way that StupidSmile chooses to go, you can take down Shaper very, very quickly, even on a budget early on in a league. If you don't like angry, screeching, bald heads flying around the game and you prefer maybe the calmer, soother approach of simply a Spectromancer, then I can't recommend any other build higher than Kay's Spectre Summoner. She does a wonderful job every single league. She comes out with multiple videos that show off different power levels and different comparative stats about the different Spectres that are available in that league. She's been doing this literally for years, updating and keeping the Necromancer community at large abreast of the various Spectres that are viable, that are strong, that are weak in some areas and stronger in others, or that simply provide good quality of life for other builds. If you are looking for a one-stop shop to tell you about all of the different Spectre metas that have been and that are presently, this is going to be the build for you, Kay's Spectre Summoner. But maybe you don't like floaty ghosts helping you out. Maybe instead you prefer something more solid, something rock solid, something like a golem. Well, then I recommend for you Skyscan's Carry Me Golems, using carrion golems and stone golems as an elementalist. It's incredibly tanky and can take down all of the various endgame bosses. It's ridiculous to see what is normally a utility skill, which oftentimes many builds will include golems, or at least throughout the life cycle of PoE. It used to be that golems were just basically utility skills that you would, slam a golem here or there into a build to give you a little mini boost of an aura. And it's wonderful to see how these little golems can act together as a bunch of little helpers, all taking down the endgame bosses of Path of Exile. It's hilarious to watch and see as these little tiny guys go at it, taking down some of the biggest and top end content that Path of Exile has to offer. Meanwhile, other people with their many cost, high mirror tier builds are like, what? How is it that those little rocks can take down something faster than me? It's amazing to see how consistent the DPS and the survivability is of Golemancers. Well, thanks so much for watching today as we have discussed slammers and summoners. I'd love to hear down below in the comments what your thoughts are about playing slammers or summoners in the upcoming 3.11 patch. Let us know down below what slammer or summoner you're planning on starting for PoE in 3.11 Harvest League. Drop us a comment and let us know, and as always, I hope 3.11 Harvest League is the league. A Mirror of Calandra drops for you as you're slamming or summoning your way through all that Rayclass has to offer.
Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.